All right. Thank you everyone for taking time out of your day for joining this webinar. Um, I am hosting it. My name is Chad Bowling. I'm the broadband manager for the state of Wyoming. And then joining me, we have Amy Meacham. She is a consultant for the state of Wyoming who will be presenting today. Again, thank you everyone for your time, taking time to join. And again, this call is being recorded, and then we will be putting it up on our Wyoming Business Council BEAD landing page for everyone's reference. So without further ado, Amy, I will hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chad. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone else taking time to be here with us today. I'm going to just make sure I can bring up the deck. And it's going a little slower than I thought.
No worries. All right, I can
There
see
we
your screen.
go. Okay. All right. Um, okay, so let's keep going. Today we're going to give a brief overview of the BEAD program again, and I know those of you who have joined me before have heard some of this information, and then we're going to go into details about the sections of subgrantee selection, give you a little bit of the application components, give you a little preview of the sessions to come that will dive into these subject matters in more detail. And just want to thank everyone that started a pre-qualification application. Wanted to remind folks that the application deadline is tomorrow. And so if you are, on the edge of getting your submission in, please make sure that you're submitting this, in order to participate in BEAD, we do have to have those applications. Can't come back to you without that pre-qualification application being in and submitted and reviewed and approved by the state. And as a reminder, those applications are pass-fail. So we'll go a bit into the BEAD overview next. So BEAD is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. It is a broadband deployment program. It was created by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the IIJA, and has about $42.5 billion worth of funding to get broadband all across the U.S. To unserved and underserved locations as their primary target. And so we'll go into what that means, but unserved and underserved locations are basically any location that has access to less than 100 megabits per second download and 20 megabits per second upload. And broadband serviceable locations are typically either residential or business addresses. There's also a category for community anchor institutions, but given the way that funding was divided across the US, Western states in particular have a little bit less funding to cover their large territories. And so the focus of the state is going to be on reaching all of those unserved and underserved locations with the funding. If we can go to the next slide. So Wyoming itself has $348 million, approximately $348 million to run the program. That includes what's been done to date, and then get all of the locations served throughout the state. And so a lot of work has been done so far, and folks on this call I know have participated in many of these processes so far. So last year, the state submitted 3 different plans for broadband deployment. That includes a high-level 5-year action plan that included reaching all of the different constituent groups across the state, really traveling and crisscrossing the state, making sure that folks had input into that plan. And then there were 2 initial proposals. It was an initial proposal divided into 2 pieces. One covered what's known as the challenge process, and that's really the state taking federal broadband data collection data that's submitted to the Federal Communications Commission, and then rolling that down to at the state level, and then making sure that that data is correct at the state. So that was one of the plans. It covered that model process. And then the second was focused on primarily on subgrantee selection and other pieces of the BEAD program. And so that initial proposal volume 2 is the guidebook for the application process. And so if you are not familiar with that, I highly recommend referring to initial proposal volume 2. It's on WBO's website, and it is going to be the best source of information about all of the pieces that are required for the program. So all of those were last year. Well, we can keep going. Let's go back to the main. There we go. Another view of the timeline. All of those were last year. This year, the state has run the challenge process in order to make sure that those lists of unserved and underserved locations are proper to the state and are the best, try to get the best source of data that it can in order to then allocate funding to those locations across the state through this next phase, which is the subgrantee selection process. And you can tell that that's where we are. That means community engagement is going to continue. If you're not signed up for the WBO newsletter, I highly recommend it. It's a great source of information. The website has all sorts of good resources for everyone. So just wanted to make you aware of those. In addition, the state also is applying for its digital access planning, or it submitted its digital access plan and is applying for subsequent funds in order to help communities across the state that fit the requirements for those plans to increase their digital skills, understand how to and increase their workforce skills that are related to digital skills. So it's there's a lot going on in addition to the actual deployment program. And then all of the things that are happening between the challenge process and the subgrantee selection process then get combined into what's known as the final proposal, and the provisionally awarded subgrantees. The list and the locations for those will go back to the federal government for review and approval. And then Wyoming can finalize those grant agreements and start working towards getting the additional broadband out to folks. So wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about this phase of the program. So I just mentioned pre-qualification, and we've had a webinar on that. And if you really, please, if you've started an application, consider finishing it. Those are the basic or the minimum qualifications of any entity that is trying to have a grant in the program. So it's a financial overview, understanding your technical and operational capability to run a large scale program or whatever scale that you're thinking about applying for, and some just basic knowledge of the BEAD program that you would agree to comply with. Right now, we're talking about the next phase. So those that are pre-qualified then move into the scoring phase and can apply for project area, which Wyoming has divided up into census block groups and is further looking at some of those census block groups and making some decisions about how they may be divided further depending on where they are, some natural ways to divide those up. So stay tuned. Those grant areas are not yet to be released, or they have not been released, but that the data is under review. And so that is something to watch for going forward. So here, the application materials will be released, and you'll have a chance to digest those, take a look, see what they entail. We will have a series of webinars and workshops to really go over different parts of that application, give you a chance to ask questions. If you have any questions today, please put them in the Q&A section. We're not going to take live questions, but we are going to capture them in Q&A and put them out as a frequently asked question document so that every potential applicant has access to those responses. The application portal will be open for a period of time, and then those applications will be reviewed, and grants will be put together for provisional award. There may be a delay. There's a process that's required to go back to NTIA before any provisional awardee can be notified. So just be aware that there might be a little bit of a lag time amongst that process. And then in the during that phase too, there may be negotiations with potential subgrantees for picking up additional locations or descoping a location if there are crossovers between potential applicants on locations, and then what that would look like in terms of the pricing that was offered by an applicant. And then again, as I noted before, all of this must be done within 365 days of the initial proposal, volume 1 approval. And there is a public comment period for that final proposal then before it goes to NTIA for review and approval. We can go to the next slide. So you get more process slides from me. How are you going to submit your application? So again, the WBO is releasing those application materials, and there will be a portal to, just like pre-qualification, there will be a portal to submit the information for the application, and then under the review, the WBO will score the applications, and the scoring is very well outlined in initial proposal volume 2, and there will be an upcoming webinar on that topic specifically, so that you have a good sense of how your application is going to be scored. The goal here is to be as transparent as possible about how these applications will be reviewed, scored, and selected. If during that process there's a need to, we're going to call it cure, but really revise your proposal, meaning maybe the WBO needs a bit of information, or you accidentally uploaded something that was blank, there will be a specific period of time which you will be notified about getting the correct data back to the WBO. And then again, those resubmitted applications will be reviewed for the materials that are needed, and the state will be then in a position to negotiate with respect to any additional locations that may need to be picked up. Again, making sure if there are overlapping applications, that there's a division that makes sense, and then again, final pricing, as you saw, there's a limited amount of funding to cover the entire state. So there's a lot of thought that's going into how to make this work best for the state, broadband service providers, and the constituents. So it really trying to get the best outcomes out of between the applications and the funding that's available. And then again, NTI will review preliminary award results, and then WBO will be able to announce those through the public process. So if we can go to the next slide. There are quite a number of components, and these are primarily coming from the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity document that is also part of this program. Well, while the IIJA is the statutory requirement, the federal government also creates a set of rules for the program that we're calling the BEAD NOFO, or that they call the BEAD NOFO. And I'm sure that you are all familiar with that by now, but just to reiterate, that is the set of program rules that then the initial proposal volume 2, which is the program rules for the state, has followed and adjusted accordingly for the state. So there are 9 sections to the application. And there are quite a number of pieces of information that we want you to start thinking about pulling together and having available for the application itself. And I know that folks are finishing up that pre-qualification application. Dividing these into 2 parts was to give you a little bit more time to think about what needs to be done and give you more time to collect the data to do that. So You can see we've got everything from administrative, project snapshot, the actual scoring criteria, a little bit of detail about your project plan, which includes like whether you're a priority application or a non-priority application, which we can go into in a minute. Some follow-ups on things that were included in pre-qualification, which includes the organizational managerial capabilities as well as financial capabilities, staffing and labor requirements that are down from the federal government, and then ownership information and compliance. So if we can keep going. So your project snapshot is just a quick set of information that we want to understand, some data that's about your actual project areas, that will also be included in some reporting up to NTIA. So this is going to include the estimated number of aerial and buried miles, and then the match that you are proposing for the awards. And just as a reminder, unless this is a high cost area or there is a match waiver, there is a 25% match requirement for the BEAD funding. So just what are you proposing as your match amount and your sources? And you can propose more than 25%, but it should be 25%. Otherwise, we can go next slide. So these are the scoring criteria that come directly from your initial proposal, volume 2, the state's initial proposal, volume 2. Much of the primary scoring and the speed to deployment, so those first 4 categories, are required by the BEAD NOFO. And then the value adjusts depending on what state you're working with. So you can see that priority applications, which as a reminder are end-to-end fiber applications, have this set of scoring, which includes minimal BEAD program outlay. So that's like, how much are you proposing to do a project for? How much are you're picking these 3 census block groups. What is what's your proposed funding for that? That may be more or less money that as an organization you're including, meeting the affordability requirement that's required as part of the program, meeting some questions about fair labor practices for your entity, and then speed to deployment. And then the state has also added, if you pick up unserved broadband serviceable locations, there are additional points available. Natural hazard risk mitigation in certain areas of the state that qualify for that, and then local and tribal coordination. Go to the next slide. So non-priority applications are reliable broadband. So that's, other than end-to-end fiber, it could be hybrid coax fiber networks, or fixed wireless networks, or a combo of fixed wireless and unlicensed fixed wireless networks that meet the reliable broadband definition. So they must be able to, again, meet that 100 by 20 speed. They have a different set of scoring criteria. So this slightly differs for the non-priority projects, because instead of 4 requirements from the BEAD NOFO, there are 5 here. So this that are included: speed of the network and other technical capabilities is the additional criteria under this element. And there is, as part of the BEAD NOFO, there is a very detailed scoring rubric that I would recommend reviewing as well. If we can go to the next slide. So the next section is your project plan. What does that look like? And it's there's a number of pieces of materials that will be helpful in terms of reviewing. And so this includes everything from a technical narrative, a network, a logical network diagram, the network design, but not the full engineering design. But you're going to have enough that when the engineers review this, that they understand the logic of the network and that it makes sense from a best practices perspective, And so you'll hear more about this from one of my colleagues in another webinar, and he'll really go into more detail about what's required here. This is going to include a breakdown of the cost for the project, the proposed timeline. This information, the network information will need to be certified by a professional engineer. And that does not have to be a professional engineer with licensing in this state. It can be, the professional engineer can be licensed anywhere. And that is a waiver that NTI has allowed. So just know that. And then additional certifications for general program compliance. There's also for non-priority applications, there is a fixed wireless design that the engineers will review for logic and understanding the, which spectrum band is being used or proposed and the propagation characteristics of that band. So in addition, there are a couple pieces from the organizational and managerial capacity that get added that are really part of this application more logically. So the legal opinion was moved from pre-qualification to the application because it really, we're at the point that the state needs to understand that your organization is compliant with the state, federal, and other and local laws, and just that opinion will be helpful in carrying out the activity for reviewers to understand that the entity is capable of carrying out the activities in a compliant manner. And then there are additional certifications for compliance as well. The next section is the financial capability section, and part of the BEAD NOFO is a requirement for a business plan or a pro forma. There will be a template for a pro forma that you'll be able to fill out. And again, this will be gone over in much more detail in another webinar. There's also information about letter of credit or one of the waiver options, and NTI has waived the full letter of credit requirement. So you can meet that letter of credit requirement in a number of ways, which might be a performance bond, a lowered letter of credit. Again, you'll hear more about this later. You really need to understand how you're planning to comply with that and get notification or letter confirming that from either a bank or a surety, depending on which route you're going there to meet the program requirements. And then there, again, more certifications. We can go to the next slide. So something that might be a little bit more unique in terms of project staffing and labor to this program is really information about how you're planning to staff your project. With this much money going out to states, the BEAD NOFO and really the state want to make sure that you have a plan for making sure that you can complete the project. So just knowing that there's going to be a lot of pressure on the marketplace at the same time. How are you going to deal with that in terms of, and then additional workforce information that might depend on your situation in terms of resumes that might be different from what you've already provided in terms of pre-qualification, and then certifications for compliance. Again, any updates to the ownership information that you've previously submitted would be helpful as well. Now, in terms of compliance, there are a number of pieces to this. And so just wanted to make you aware of some of these pieces, and then we'll come back in another webinar, possibly the Q&A session, and just talk a little bit about some of the reporting requirements so you're aware of those. Some of them, if you've participated in one of the CPF programs or the state and local fiscal recovery fund programs, capital project funds was CPF, you may be familiar with some of these requirements, and some of them might be different. So Just be aware of some of the differences. There is something unique to BEAD is a commitment to providing a low cost plan that is outlined fairly heavily in initial proposal volume 2. So please be aware of that. It's an agreement to participate in any ACP successor program. As we know, ACP ended this year. So really any successor program that's identified by NTIA, you want to make sure that you are including in as part of the BEAD program. And then a commitment to binding resolution of consent if you're constructing on tribal lands. We will talk further if that's a difficulty prior to actually having a grant application. And then an understanding of the various program requirements as well. Okay, well, that was fast. Let's talk about some of the upcoming webinar dates, because I really think there's some great deep dives here that'll be really useful as you're going through the application information. Once the application, once you have more information about the templates and the application details, it will be helpful to maybe participate in one or all of these sessions so that you have a sense of what the real technical requirements are. I really think the grant, the project area selection, and the application scoring will really will help your information about the details that will be required for the program. And then there'll be a more in-depth overview of the financial capabilities and the financial review so that you're prepared for that information as well. And with that, I'm not seeing any questions in the queue, but if you have questions for the queue, please make sure you submit those or submit them to WBO. And back to you, Chad.
All right. Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions either. Perfect. Yes, again, thank you everyone for your time today, taking the time out of your day to join. Hopefully this was constructive and you're able to get some good information out of this. I believe our next one is, if I'm not mistaken, next week, maybe. I'll have to go back and look.
That is correct.
Yes, okay. So please be sure if you have the time to join. We'd love to see you come back. But otherwise, have a great weekend, and we're here to support you however we can. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.